Yes, Turkish cabinet met this afternoon. More lavish promises after that as the president addressed the nation. Remember, he's already promised to rehouse everybody within a year. Well, this afternoon he said 30,000 new constructions would begin in March, all of which will be built well away from any seismic fault lines. Well, if you've ever seen a geological map of Turkish fault lines, you'll know that's going to be a hard one to deliver. Moreover, he said anyone who's lost a relative will get 100,000 Turkish lira, roughly 4,300 UK pounds, but again, carefully undefined what that actually means, anyone who's lost a relative. Electioneering promises, genuine promises, well, Turks will very quickly decide that. We begin tonight, though, over the border in Syria, just down the road from here, really, and consider the contrasting images you're about to see. In Turkey, you get high-vis equipment, heavy lift equipment, thermal imaging, small cameras, you name it. At most of the sites, it's there for search and rescue, which is still continuing. Totally different in Syria, ravaged by 12 years of bitter warfare. Pitiful images of a few groups of individuals literally forming human chains to try and move the rubble by hand. Boy, do those people need help tonight. Little by little, aid is getting to Syria. Far later, say global charities, than it should have done. A Saudi humanitarian supply flight on the tarmac at Aleppo airport. North of Idlib in Harem, they search with nothing like the heavy lift gear available in Turkey. The UN says almost 7,000 people have been killed in Syria, 10,000 at least injured in a zone where millions, of course, have lost their homes during 12 years of war. And north over the border in Turkey, they also still search, 8 days on. Here's why. Today, another 7 people at least pulled alive from the rubble across the country. Turkish military footage of 2 women saved in Hatay after being trapped for 8 days and 11 hours. An 18-year-old man rescued in Adıyaman. A 17-year-old boy in Kahramanmaraş. And his 21-year-old brother pulled out soon after. Today the UN said the rescue phase is coming to a close as the focus moves to shelter, food and schooling for survivors. Gaziantep now faces safety surveys on so many buildings, some will have to come down. And then there's Gaziantep Castle. Over 1,100 years or so, it's seen earthquakes come and go, yet parts are now obliterated. The tourists gone, their cafes shut down. These ancient ramparts partly crumbled by the magnitude of what happened here 8 days ago. To rebuild or not rebuild, that really is the question. Do you refurbish this, which, after all, is only what people have been doing in this unique place since Roman times? Or to some extent, do you just leave this to stand as a symbol, the struggle between human structures on the one hand and the enormous powers of nature on the other? Ukesh Koç saw it all happen.
It was a really powerful tremor, like a monster moving around deep underground. As the first tremor happened, we were trying to run away and got hit with the second one. We sheltered beneath the castle. It was like they were catapulting rocks down onto us.
He wants to show us his house, or more accurately, the narrow alleyways that reach it here in the old city. Cracked walls, masonry still coming down with each aftershock.
The reason we won't go back to our houses is that these walls have 10-centimeter cracks. We're frightened they'll fall on us. In the slightest tremors, they're all jangling again.
So deep is that fear that even though his house is intact, he won't stay there. Living in a tent is preferable by night. Supervising food and water handouts by day beneath the shattered castle. The fear the aftershocks instill. Cross town to the stadium, now a tented encampment for families from the surrounding tower blocks. Children appear able to escape their fears, perhaps in play. For adults, though, here again, the tent or the car feels safer at night than home even when home exists. English teacher Sadat volunteers here by day, sleeps in his car by night, even though his flat is fine.
Still, there are many little earthquakes, and we don't want to get in our homes. So I also stay in my car, and many people are here staying in this tents because they are frightened.
The water is back on in this city. The gas supply remains off, but some shops and businesses have reopened today for the first time. Tentative steps on a long, long road to recovery. And the difficult action now, as we've been reporting in Syria. We've said in recent days the Americans have temporarily lifted their sanctions on the Damascus regime to try and get the aid moving in. Clearly, an awful lot more has to be done in terms of air bridging aid into cities like Aleppo, close to the earthquake zone, but also opening up more corridors, land corridors, over the border of here from Turkey down into the North Syrian earthquake zone. There's an awful lot of work to be done there. It is urgent.
Alex, thanks very much. Well, the northwest region of Syria has been desperately waiting for aid and medical supplies, which have been in short supply, partly because of a lack of access. Earlier, I spoke to Dr. Mufad El-Hamadeh, former president of the Syrian American Medical Society, who's been treating the injured in Idlib Central Hospital. I began by asking him what the situation was like in that hospital.
I just arrived to Idlib Central Hospital, and I toured on some of these patients here, and I've seen very heartbreaking cases. And many of us who came with me on this trip, the volunteers seem to be heartbroken because they see how sick these patients are and how little or how deficient the healthcare system is in its ability to handle these cases.
A lot of the cases seem to be children whose parents have been killed in the earthquake.
That is true. That is absolutely true. That is a heartbreaking part. Is you see many of those innocent children, they look you in the eye and they see that you're coming over, they're thanking you, the tears in their eyes, and they're hoping that they can provide them with some hope. And they tell you heart-wrenching stories about how they lost their mothers, their siblings, their parents. And, one of the kids who just lost her, she's 7 years old, she lost her parents and her sisters and all her families, and she's the only survivor. And I asked her, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she tells me, I want to be a doctor. And I asked her why. So because I could have saved my parents, I could have saved my sisters.
Very hard to hear and hard to operate in the conditions that you've described. Coming in from America as you do, what is your reaction to the terrible injuries you're seeing?
Honestly, I could not cry. I mean, my tears fell off immediately. Seeing those kids and seeing their emotions and their surgeries and then looking at me and just hoping that I can provide them with a little bit of a hope. I couldn't take it. Many others who were with me couldn't take it. But I faced that before, and I always, it did upset me how people become numb. And it's not only our staff, it's basically patients, the population. It looks like death and suffering is a norm of life here.
How hard was it for you to access the areas where your help is most needed? We took off the U.S. Saturday night. We arrived Sunday. We had to wait 24 hours until our permits were cleared in order to pass through. Once we pass through, it's not a problem. It's just, but it takes time, and it's a bureaucracy. There's a huge bureaucracy. I mean, I can't understand why the borders are not totally open for everyone who wants to come in and provide help. The people in Idlib for 7-8 days after the earthquake have suffered, and they were left alone. Many people could have been saved, many lives could have been saved if the people acted sooner.
The international community, in a way, has been numb from so many years of looking at the suffering of the Syrian people. Does that concern you that after 12 years now of war, that people have forgotten about the plight of the Syrians?
I just wish this is not a temporary thing. I wish this is not just a week long, and as soon as it disappears in the media, people forget about it. I really think that it's time for the international community, the governments, to stand up for their responsibilities for all what is happening here in Syria.
Dr. Mafad El-Hamadeh, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.